The video this week will be focused on appliquing on your Longarm machine. Frankly, the video got very long, so I decided to break it into two parts. Part one will focus on how I started with a block in Electric Quilt, took it into Art and Stitched, used my Silhouette Cameo to cut out the shapes, and then part two shows how I actually did the stitch out on my Longarm machine. Applique. So I'm going to start in Electric Quilt, and this is just a block called Leaf Scroll, and you can find that in your EQ library. But I'm going to take a couple of these blocks and take some snapshots using my snipping tools. But first, I want to have pretty good contrast, so I'm going to actually recolor the block. And I am going to, turn the background white, and I'm going to turn the other pieces black, just to make sure that I've got as strong a contrast as possible. And then I will add this to the sketchbook, and I will take my window snipping tool and I will take a snapshot of the entire block, including the boundaries, and I will save that. Now I'm going to go back into EQ, and this is even more important if you've got any overlapping pieces. I don't for this one, but I'm still going to just bring everything down to basically one set of shapes. So I'm just going to get rid of, I'm even going to get rid of this one because that's a mirror of the other one there. And then I'm going to spread these out just a little bit. Okay, and I will color these. Actually, they're already colored. And this one, I'm going to take another snapshot. I'm not going to include the outer borders, and I'm just going to pick up the pieces. So I will call this one 2 EQ scroll pieces. Okay. I've now opened Art and Stitch, and now I will bring in the snapshots that I took in EQ. So I will start by first adding a backdrop by clicking on the backdrop tool, and I will select EQ Scroll JPEG, and I've opened it. And I'm going to change the dimensions. And again, now this is the full block that includes the outside edges. I'm going to make this a little bit larger, so I'm going to use 8 inches for the height. And I'm going to lighten it a bit. And that gives me a pretty good backdrop to play with. I will show you when I do a zoom in, and you can see that there's not a lot of definition because of the pixels in the drawing. So that was why I decided to actually take a look at some of the shapes before I applied it to this this background. So I will open another Art and Stitch file. And for this one, I'm actually going to use the outline wizard. And I'm going to select an image, and now I'm going to select the EQ scroll pieces and then click on next. And I do want to bring the size up so I have a little bit more definition. And I'm going to bring the width to 15, and that will change the height as well. And notice that there are three image types. I'm going to select color image because I have a black and white that will actually work really well. And so I'll click on next. And I do want to load the backdrop. And then I will click on next and finish. Okay, now this comes in as with stitches. So the first thing I want to do, I brought it over the backdrop, but I'm going to want to turn that back into artwork. So I click on the back to artwork button, and you'll notice now that the connecting stitches are all removed. Okay, now I want to, actually I'm going to go back to the backdrop and I'm going to lighten that quite a bit so that I can check on my the definition in my pieces that were traced. Okay, so now let's zoom in on, and I can use the zoom key for that, and you can see you know, there's a little bit of a challenge here in that it covers it, but it's a little choppy. And so I'm going to select the reshape key. And one of the tricks I have liked to use within EQ is to just draw a box around all of the nodes. And the first thing I'm going to do is then just right click once I've selected it and change them all to smooth. And you know, if you look at this, I mean, that really cleaned up this shape really, really nicely. And I can still, you know, do some adjustment, but I've got a really nice smooth shape, and it is nicely following the shape that I brought in from EQ. I'm going to now actually turn the pen width to 0, click on the fill, and I'm going to use a green and apply that, and I think that makes a really nice leaf. And I'm going to now do the same on that center leaf. Okay, once I like what I've done there, now I'm going to take these shapes, copy them, and move them back to design 1 and paste them. I will want to resize because that is quite a bit larger. I'm going to just use the corners of the box, and that will keep things proportionate. And really what I'm doing here becomes my new master document in my master shape. Okay, so Control D, mirror image, plop in place, and then that. Select both of those, Control D, mirror image, and move in place. Okay, I have now copied everything over to my initial design, and I have resized everything and put them in place. So from there, I can go ahead and basically hide my backdrop, and this now becomes my new master file. Now I am going to take one more copy. So I could have done Control A or just drawn a box, and I'm going to do Control C and do a new design and do Control V, paste, and that will bring everything over at the same size. But let's go back to design 1, and what I want to do now is select the Applique button, and it's one of the red square buttons on the left side. And when I did this, it actually applies a satin stitch and Probably not what you were expecting, but we can now go ahead and change some of the dimensions. So I'm going to change satin to blanket, and I'm going to, there are 3 check boxes: sew placement, sew tack down, and sew finish. Turn the middle one off. Because I'm going to fuse, I do not need to actually sew the tack downs down. And so I'm going to select apply. And I now have a file that I can use. So I'm going to save this as in my IntelliQuilter, and I'm going to call this EQ Scroll Art and Stitch IQP, and I will save. Okay, we are almost done in Art and Stitch. I'm going to go back though to that Design 3, and I'm going to need to bring the shapes over to my silhouette. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete everything other than one set of each of the shapes. I'm going to position those so I can do some tracing and do a nice box around it. And I'm going to go ahead and take a snapshot of that as well. And I will call this Art and Stitch Fill Design. Okay, in Art and Stitch Fill Design, the one thing I also want to do is to actually select all of the items. And if you go to under Properties to transform, just make a note of the width and the height. So it's width of 9.61 and height of 8.34. That will be critical when we take this into Silhouette. Right now, you can actually close down Art and Stitch. Okay, I've now opened Silhouette Studio, and I am going to start by opening that last file that I made in Art and Stitch. And when I select the open button, it only opens to those that are the Silhouette Studio versions, but if you click on the drop down box, I will select my JPEG files, and you can see here's my Art and Stitch Fill Design. So I'm going to open that. I'm going to drag it, the corner, to be fairly large. And what I'm going to do now is actually do a trace. So that's under Object, Trace. I'll select my trace area. And you can see you've got yellow around each of the shapes, but I'm going to turn the high pass filter off. They all fill in, but I want to see if I can smooth the edges. That's usually best done with the threshold, and that actually seems to be working nicely. Sometimes you can also bring the scale down a bit, and that helps. And once I find what I like, I will select the trace button, and it has now traced all of my shapes. Now, if you remember back in Art and Stitch, I suggested that you write down a particular measurement. We're going to resize these based on that. So what I'm going to do is use the Select tool, and I'm going to select all of the shapes, and I'm going to now do an Object Scale. And for that scale, I want to change the width to what was in my Art and Stitch file, and that was 9.61. I've got Lock Aspect Ratio clicked on, so I'm going to now select Apply, and it changed the height to also 8.33. So these are now scaled exactly the same as in my Art and Stitch file. I'm also going to, while I'm in Object, release the compound path, and that's going to give me um, separate boxes for each of these. Now I just need to duplicate each of the patterns, and I'm just going to show you one here. If you look at that scroll, I'm going to first of all just fill it with purple, and I'm going to replicate by doing a mirror image, so mirror below, and then I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to do Object Replicate, and I want to do a mirror right. And you can see that I'm going to have to do some repositioning so that they fit on my page, but you can just follow normal, sort of repositioning within Silhouette and do your cutting from there. Thanks for watching Applique on your Longarm Part 1. I hope you gained some understanding of how you could use your Longarm to do applique. The Part 2 will focus on how I now took these designs to my Quilter, which I run on my APQS Millennium machine. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to having you join me for Part 2.